I'm so good. My husband is sleeping. I'm trying to decide if I'm supposed to wake him up.
Johanna's
It's gonna be
recording this. He'll be
recorded.
okay.
We are recording. It will be available for video after.
Oh, good. So now everyone knows that he's sleeping in the middle of the day.
I think, the let sleeping babies lie. My rule is let sleeping parents lie.
I like that rule.
For sure.
If they're getting a nap in, don't disturb them.
If the
Right.
kids are napping, the parents should be napping.
Yes,
Especially for new parents.
Yeah,
oh my
we have
goodness.
we have 2 out of 3 napping right now. So
Nice.
Ooh, that's
this
great.
is the
Well,
time.
three out of 4 if you count him.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll have a few people jumping in and joining us as we go. But I am excited that you guys are here. I'm really excited to do our very first ever MCC Zoom Parent Panel. So this is the first time we've ever done this, and I'm just excited and really grateful for the panelists that joined us that are going to be sharing from their experience and what they have done to share Jesus and to talk about God with their kids. So we'll hear from them in a second. I will just say for anyone either watching later, I think everyone on here knows me now, but anyone watching later, I'm Johanna Beachy, and I'm the family life pastor at MCC. So I get just really the joy and the privilege of getting to support families, which I think families are one of the coolest things that God created, and I absolutely love them. And kids and students are my favorite people group. They're just my favorite to hang out with. And so I love that we get to do this. And this is just a cool, interesting new way we're trying to support parents during this time. And so it's going to be very conversational, very informal. We have a few questions that we're going to ask our panelists. And then any parents who are joining us on here, or any of our team who wants to ask these parents some questions, you can go for it. We know that really they're not like the fount of all wisdom, that's Jesus himself, but we also are looking at them and just seeing the way that so our team really asked these people to join us for this because we saw the way that they lead their family and their kids to Jesus and the way that they share God with them. And we thought they have wisdom that we can learn from, and they have experience that we can learn from. And so we're excited that they're here. And so with that, I'm actually going to ask them to just introduce themselves. So who they are, where they live, the campus that they're part of, and then also just tell us something about your family. So how many kids do you have? And then I'm going to throw you this little intro question. I want to know the weirdest question that your kids have asked you, because this is what a lot of this is about. We're trying to kind of dive into the questions that we know your kids are asking you. They're asking you questions about God. They're asking you questions about the Bible, and you're there like, it's my job to answer this to these little people. And so I want to know, as we're going around and hearing your intros, what is and it doesn't have to be related to the Bible, just the weirdest question you can think of that you've been asked by your kids. So I'm going to just toss it over to Melissa here, and she's going to start. And then Melissa, you can toss it to any of the other panelists to introduce themselves.
Okay, sounds good. So my name is Melissa Shattuck. I live in Francistown with my family. I have 8 children ranging in ages from almost 27 to almost 10. I have 5 girls and 3 boys. Just off the bat, I will tell you that I've decided that boys are physically exhausting and girls are mentally exhausting. So if you haven't gotten to that point in your life yet, you will. Both wonderful in their own ways, but those are the areas of taxation for the parent. God has taught me along the way as a parent, just that, when I first started, I had a lot of experience. I've been in children's ministry since I was 16 years old. Grew up in the church. My dad was basically a lay pastor. Thought I had it figured out, when I started my family. And God quickly showed me that I had no idea what I was doing. And that I didn't need to. That was the key part for me, was that I was just, these were charges given to me by him. And that if I just relied on him, that he would guide and direct me, that I didn't need to have all the answers. I didn't need to know everything. I just needed to be willing to listen, and that he would lead. And that there's no such thing as a perfect parent. I would be really hard on myself, sometimes because I felt like I got it wrong, or and God was quick to say, hey, listen, this is me. This isn't you. Just rely on me and I will get you through this. And he has been very faithful in that. And I can say, it's very exciting to come out the other side, of parenting and watch your young adult kids start to thrive and, to begin their own adult journey and to seek God in all things. And it's really probably the most exciting experience of my entire life, I think, so far, is to watch that happen. So Weird questions. Well, I'd say probably, I don't know if this is really weird, but this has been one of the harder questions for me, and it actually is Bible related. And that is just talking about animals in heaven. Like that discussion comes up. We're an animal loving family. We live on the farm. We have horses and ducks and chickens and lots of dogs and goats. And so we experience death here on the farm, with animals. And that's been an interesting one for me because it's not necessarily black and white. And having to reassure them, but I always go back, so I guess without even knowing exactly how to answer that, whenever I don't know the answer, I always go back to who God is, and that is that God is a loving, just, and gracious God. And if he created those animals with all the love and care that he did, then surely he has a plan, of what happens to them after death. So that's my answer so far. But it's been that's a tough question with kids. It really is, because they have this undying love for animals sometimes. So anyway, did I answer everything? I can't remember. Yeah, okay, awesome. So take it away, anybody. Christian, maybe you want to have
Yeah, glad to jump in. Christian Scott, my wife Anna and I have been attending MCC Wellington for, I think January was like our 18th anniversary. So we started out as virtually newlyweds and now have 2 children. Enzo is 14. He just graduated 8th grade Friday night. Yay for that. And then our daughter Zofia is 9 and she's going into the 4th grade. Grew up in Chester, moved to Auburn 13 years ago. Love small town New England. For about a 4-year period, I was the campus pastor at Wellington. God was very clear when it was time to get into ministry and time to get out of ministry, and MCC is my home no matter what he wants to do with me. So just go with the flow with that. Weirdest question, and again, I'm going to go Bible related too. So I think it was when Enzo turned 9. He said for his 10th birthday, he wanted to get baptized. I'm like, cool, let's kind of talk about that over the course of the year. So the night before his baptism, he looked at me and he said, hey, Dad, when you baptize me, can you hold me under the water for 3 seconds? Now, being a pastor, I had done a lot of baptisms. I'm like, 3 seconds? I've had spouses ask, hey, hold him under a little longer. But as far as children, it's like 3 seconds. I'm like, yeah, buddy, why 3 seconds? And he said, 1 second for every day that Jesus was in the tomb. Like, okay, you get baptism. You understand the symbolism, the reality, but also the symbolism behind it. Super powerful moment in my life. That was when, as parents, I'm sure that you guys can appreciate that moment of relief where you say, oh, they do understand who God is. We've done something right because God's fixed all those mistakes and all the things that I've done wrong leading up to this. So that's my story. I'm going to throw it over to Tom.
Hi, Tom Stevens. My family and I live in Loudon. We've been attending MCC Concord since October 20th, 2019. That was the first Sunday after Oasis joined up. And prior to that, we had been at Oasis for, it was about 2 years. And before that, Faith Community Bible Church in Loudon for about 15 years. I'm a high school band director, so high school is kind of my wheelhouse, and my wife is a middle school band director as well. So middle school is her wheelhouse. So it works out perfect because our kids are just leaving 6th grade and just finishing her first year in high school. So we're kind of into that area that we are most comfortable now. So it's a lot of fun. Oh boy, questions. It's not so much the questions that they ask, it's more of the questions that I can see they want to ask or think they should ask. More along the lines of like, why am I having to do this? Why is work good? Why should I have to work for something? Why should I get a job? Why should I go mow the lawn? Why can't you just give me the $20 to go buy what I want to buy? It's I can't think of any questions specifically off the top of my head, but it's more like the things that I think they should ask. And then it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense, Dad. I can't think of anything else. And so I'll defer off to Diana.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm Diana, and my husband Sammy and I have been married for 22 years. we have kind of traversed the country, and we are now back in Idaho, which is where we came from 10 years ago. Our daughters are, oh, and as far as MCC, I should really come up with a date here, but I think it was 5 or 6 years. And so we, for a period of time, were involved as volunteers, and then jumped on with some leadership there. And then eventually a couple of years ago came on staff. And then I've actually hit all the campuses. Hey, online now too. So through the course of the years, have gotten to know a lot of different people. My girls were at sort of that age where we really felt it was time for them to have more peers in their life who were following Jesus and kind of feel that normalcy, which is one thing that brought us to MCC. They are now 19 and off at college. Sarah is, when it's not a pandemic. So she's home with us at the moment. And then my younger daughter, Grace, is 17. And interestingly, what I found the beauty of coming to MCC was really actually in the next generation up that reached back to my girls and had such a huge impact in their spiritual development. Not that they didn't make friends too, but just that next generation has been so cool for them. So I also wanted to just throw out there, and I did get the permission of my younger daughter, Grace, but just a little bit of unique perspective that I might be able to offer today is not only, first of all, I am a lifelong learner, and I am here today to learn. Like, I don't have answers. Just gonna be straight up honest. I love my girls. I love the faith that they have in Jesus. And it's been a journey, let me tell you. But for Grace, it's been dealing with her PTSD, which we realize now she had from the age of 7. And it took us a few years ago to really put some pieces together. So just sort of a different insight too on what is it like to have a child with mental illness, and to kind of walk through that spiritual journey together. So she's doing pretty well. We talk a lot, which is great. So that's my family, and I'm excited to be here. Weird questions. I actually asked the girls, I said, you guys asked weird questions through the years? I think it's because it's been so many years since they were tiny that I can remember some cute moments. When you're working on the keyboard and you say, what was it we would say to them? Like, click. When I was teaching her the keyboard, I would say something like click, and she would speak it instead. Like, no, I mean, but I can't really think of weird moments. Although I'm sure that I should have just written them down, right? But so many fun moments through the years. I'm just watching them grow and learn what faith is. So excited to be here today.
Thank you, guys. We're so grateful that you were willing to be here and give of your time in this way and just give of your experience and what you've been learning. So what we're going to do next, I have a few questions, and I'm just going to toss it to a certain panelist. And then if any of the other panelists want to also speak into that question, just raise your hand and we'll give you some time for that. So we'll go through a few questions, and then plan is to leave a little bit of time at the end. We're scheduled to go till 3. We may shorten it a little bit, just depending on where we're at, because you all have kids to get back to. But we'll leave some time for you guys to throw out some questions too. So if you have any questions that you want to ask these guys. So my first question, then I'm going to go over to Melissa. I just want to hear from you. How do you answer your kids when they ask who God is and who Jesus is? So a big, basic question. What do you do when your kids are like, well, who is God and who is Jesus?
Well, as they get older, we started to kind of break this down a little further, but on a real simple level, even starting with the beginning of the world, all creation had to have a starting point. So you have a supreme being that is responsible for the creation of the universe, right? So I kind of just start with like, start there. Like there is God is the supreme being that began everything. That's where everything started. Everything originates from God, right? And then we start to talk about, I talk about the Trinity lightly, because it's a difficult concept for them to understand. But I definitely start when they're younger, because I feel like if you don't, it becomes very difficult, as they get older. So we start breaking things down pretty young, even in terms of like, the creation piece. But then I found some very valuable tools in the Bible. Like God is referred to in like 200 different ways. Like there's like over 200 different ways for names for God in the Bible, and they all have significant meanings into breaking down who God is. He's the God who sees. He's the God who hears. He's the strong creator, jealous God most high. A strong tower, Lord of hosts, and all those things sound really kind of like adult level, but really they're really not when you break it down. Like, God does see us, right? God does hear us when we talk to him. God, we can trust him, and there's lots of evidence for that in the Bible. But this is one of the first books that I ever wrote. I read my kids about it. We do a daily devotion every day here. It's like, we homeschool, so I'll preface by saying that I've been homeschooling since day one. So I think I'm on about year, 24, I think, homeschooling. So I've learned along the way. But one thing I know, and I have always known, God has been gracious to share with me, is that my kids can learn anything that they want at any point in time. We have internet, they can find out facts wherever they need to find them, but their character is my responsibility as a parent. And so that is something we spent an exorbitant amount of time on. So even if we didn't get to math that day and we spent an hour and a half talking about what it means to be trustworthy, then it was a good day in my opinion. And that's kind of, but so we have a devotion time every day where we'll read different research. I could literally list off a million different resources for devotionals, but pick up anything. Like, it doesn't even matter. I'm diverting. I know that's another question, so I will try to get back. But this book is called God's Names, and it's by Sally Michael. I don't know if you guys can see that well. But basically, it breaks down one name at a time, and it talks about what that means about God. What does that tell us about God? Rather than just the name, like strong creator, what does that mean? Well, okay, that talks about him creating the universe, like God Most High, what does that mean? Like, that he is actually, higher than any other. And how can we relate to that? How does that, and it gives biblical references, and how can we relate to that? Like, he's all powerful and we are not. Like, we can rely on him in times of trouble. So it breaks it down. What does it mean that God is jealous? Like, this one threw my kids for a loop. Like, jealous God? What on earth does that mean? And that basically just breaks down that for them that he, like, his heart is fully devoted to us, and he wants our hearts fully devoted to him. And what are the things that distract us from God and keep us from that relationship with God? And so, like, all I can say is God has been so faithful to gives me pieces from everything that I ever read to my kids. I never came back void for myself. God is faithful that way. And so, like, I'm reading through this stuff with my kids, and they're going, oh, okay. And I'm going in my head, oh, great. It was just as meaningful for me as it was for them. So this is one book. And then there's another book that we actually read just this year. It's a little bit newer. It's called 40 Reasons to Trust God, and it's called I Am. And again, this breaks down the names of God. And there's always, it's simple. It's so simple in that it tells you what you can do afterwards together as an activity. It gives you a prayer to pray together. It gives you action points. Like, this is a great way to get to know God. And so those are just some of the resources when my kids ask that question, who is God? I can bring them right to the Bible and to some of these. These are right from the Bible. Some of these 200 names for God and the different ways that God references himself and why that is. So I think it's appropriate for ages, goodness, I would say ages 5 and up easily.
Thank you, Melissa. Any of the rest of the panelists want to speak to that for a minute before we move to the next question? All right, then that's the perfect segue, because you were talking about how you just bring them right back to the Bible when they're asking you who God is, when they're asking about Jesus. And I love that, because I would love to hear, so I'm going to go over to Christian and just hear, how do you explore the Bible with your kids? We know as adults, the Bible's so jam-packed, and we will spend the rest of our lives exploring it and learning it. So how do you kind of unpack that? How do you dive in and explore that with your kids?
Yeah, so it's different for each of them. And there are so many great resources, like Melissa was saying. And so helping them to not only understand and appreciate the Bible, but like you were saying, Johanna, the Bible is living. So you've got to stay in it and going with it over and over. But we started really early with doing devotions with our kids. I'm not a Bible scholar. I didn't go to Bible school. I've got a business degree. But there are great people like Sarah Young, who wrote Jesus Calling, and a lot of us as adults have read the Jesus Calling devotionals. There are 3 different versions of this, that it's 365 devotions for kids. We've done all 3 versions, so 3 years of that. Enzo versus Sophia. Boys and girls are clearly different. They play different. They interpret different. So for Enzo, the thing that really got him hooked on learning his Bible, I don't know if you guys have seen this, the Brick Bible. Okay, yeah, I'm getting a head nod. This is how I understood the Bible. So yeah, Melissa, the more we read to our kids, the more we understand. Someone took the time to like do out the whole Bible in Legos, which I'm jealous I didn't come up with that idea, because that would have been fun. That would have been a great project. But personally, I've always struggled with the book of Revelation. Once I saw it in Lego and I could visualize, I'm like, oh, now I get it. So that was fabulous working with him. Last year, our next door neighbor came over. She's like, hey, my kids come to church with me, but they really don't understand why we're there, and they're starting to ask questions, and I don't know what to do. I'm like, did they play with Legos? And as soon as I had a yes, I'm like, here, you need this. Here, take this. So that's been a great resource. For Zofia, we've really been enjoying God's Little Princess bedtime devotions. It's short. She's old enough that she reads. So every night when we go to bed, we pray first. And even that is somewhat a standard prayer, but the devotions, something different every night that she reads. There's a little, what's it called? It's called Good Night Giggles and Grace. So kind of that little activity to reinforce the concept that's going on there, and then a little prayer. Yeah, but every night the prayer is, God, give me the wisdom to know what is right and the courage to do what is right, even when it's hard. And please give me one person to share your love with. My kids have been praying for one since Bo got there, pretty much, because we already had Enzo. I've got the 6:03 p.m. alarm set on my clock. When my phone goes off, I yell 6:03, and no matter where the kids are in the house, they yell, "Dear God, please give me one person to share your love with." And if for some reason we're not together at 6:03, and Zofia realizes, keep in mind, she's 9. If she realizes that it's after 6:03 and we haven't prayed, she's like, "Hey, Dad, where's your alarm?" And so we stop and pray. So that's such a powerful message, and it's something that I've instilled in my kids. Goodness, I've shared it with business associates literally across the country, just helping people to spread the gospel in an authentic and loving way, and that certainly is what we need all the time, and especially right now. So there's my input on how to introduce them to the Bible.
Love it. Thanks, Christian. Did anyone else want to chime in with that? Any other? And just so you guys know, I will make sure to get all these resources and devotionals that these parents are sharing and get a list of that so we can have that listed out for you guys.
Great idea.
All right. Then we are going to head right over to Diana. And what I would love to hear from you is to just speak into, obviously this is, we're talking more the informational side right now and the questions that kids are asking. But like Christian mentioned, I mean, he didn't go to Bible school, but he ended up in ministry, and he had an encounter with God. He had an encounter with Jesus that has now impacted his family and his kids in a life-changing way. And so much of what you guys are doing, it's not just, centered in this informational piece that you're giving your kids, but it's your own life experience. It's the encounter that you yourself have had with God and you yourself have had with Jesus, which I can speak to, not being a parent, but being the kid of parents who love Jesus and love God. That's probably one of the most powerful things that you can do, is just this idea of sharing your own personal testimony with your kids. And so Diana, I would love to kind of hear from you, like how you've done that with your girls, and how you've worked that into just how you're explaining to them who God is and what does this mean to be the church, and all of these big questions. How is that coming out of your personal experience and your testimony, and just how do you share that with them, with the different ages they're at, and just walking through that. So I would love to hear that from you, and then from any other of panelists who want to chime in and share about how they've shared their own testimony and their own walk with Jesus with their kids.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that. I love so much these ideas that you guys have been talking about so far, and how to bring truth to them. And I feel like we seal it in a way with our lives, right? So we can give them all this information, and we take them to the truth and take them to the Bible. But what they really want to hear also from us is, yeah, I struggle. Yeah, it's hard. Or, this is what it was like for me when I was your age. And I remember struggling with pride. Or I'll tell them stories even, of this one time, I can't believe what I did, but I made this mistake and then I wouldn't admit it. And so finding ways to just sort of weave that life into the truth that we're sharing with them is so powerful. And so for us, it happens very organically. And depending on your testimony, so for me, raised in a Christian home, my story has been very gradual, do you want to call it, but Jesus always there with me, accepting him at a young age. My husband, on the other hand, lived a lot of years away. And so it's been really interesting as his gradual reveal of his story as they've gotten older, how it's very powerful for them to hear now the mistakes that he made as a teenager and older, and decisions he made in his life, and how God brought him to where he is today. So for our family, it's been very organic. I would say our best talking is in the car. I don't know if anyone relates to that, but wow, there is something about that undivided time. And, we get into these great topics. And I always want my girls to know, more than anything, I'm a sinner saved by grace. There's nothing that I could do to earn it. I just want to, I just showing you, this is where I've walked, and then praying that they'll choose to follow him. So I've really, like I said, it's just been a very organic process for us as a family, but I feel like we've developed a relationship too of trust where they can ask us questions about, decisions that we've made in the past, or what did it look like, when we didn't obey, when we didn't follow. Because I want them to know too, and this, even just in this sense of parenting right now, I want all of us to know, it is never too late to make a good decision with our kids, to try a new habit, to do something, to maybe say, oh, I didn't really like how I used to do this, so I'm going to change it. And I want my girls to see that in me, so that they can in turn say, yeah, oh, so maybe this isn't what I wanted to do, but now I'm going to do this. I'm going to pursue Jesus. So that's sort of been the story at my house. And I continue to enjoy, as my girls are now getting into their adulthood too, being able to share our testimonies on that kind of level where we can encourage each other.
I think it's great that you mentioned that you use the car rides. There are times that I'll go to walk the dog. I'm like, hey, Enzo, why don't you come walk the dog with me? It's like, why? I'm like, because I enjoy spending time with you. And you never know what conversations are going to come out of that. Certainly with him going into high school, I feel like I'm being even more intentional about trying to share what my experiences have been, because he's a mini me. So a lot of what he's going through, I'm like, oh, yep, been there, done that. Here's what works for me. You might want to try this. But he's really funny, because he's at the point where he'll look at me, he's like, are you going to make this into a life lesson? Like, yeah, because they're everywhere. So I'm probably am. Yes. Yeah. So I am, because I love you, and I want you to learn these things, not by doing it wrong. I had a friend years ago who said, so many times we hear lessons from people that say, oh, here's the wrong way to do it, so go do something different. But I think it's really powerful when we have our stories of faith, where here's what I did right. I accepted Jesus, and the best decision I ever made, and being able to share that piece of who we are that has the eternal impact on them.
Yeah. I just want to add to that, because that's a really important point. I think especially as kids get bigger, sharing your testimony is a powerful thing. And for some of us, depending on, I have a significant childhood experience that is not even something I was willing to share with my kids when they were younger. But as they grew older, it was something that I felt like they needed to know. Why they needed to know it was not because I wanted to say the world is hard and horrible and the horrible things could happen, but I wanted to show them the redemptiveness of Jesus in my life based on that circumstances. I could have chosen to be a victim. I could have chosen a negative path, but no, I chose to let Jesus redeem my life and my story, and to use it for his glory and for his purpose. So I think those are important things. Like, I was also caught, by one of my kids at one point in time who basically is like, Mom, like, you're perfect. I can't ever be like, I mean, like, this is too hard, like just being a Christian was just so challenging, right? Because they were just so tempted. And I'm like, whoa, okay, that was an eye opener for me. Like, I need to be more transparent. Because for me, where I had walked made my faith so strong that it looked to them like this is just who I was all my life. So opening up at a younger age, and I highly recommend, but also just adding that redeeming thread of like, yeah, I made mistakes, but God redeemed them, and that's part of who he is. So.
I'm going to add in a little personal testimony before we move to the next question, just because someone asked me. So I have 3 siblings, so there's 4 of us, and we all grew up with Christian parents and grew up in the church at MCC, actually. Someone asked me a couple years ago, what's one thing that my parents did that had one of the biggest impacts on me? And the first thing that came into my mind, because they are asking me in a very informal setting, the first thing that came into my mind was I realized they showed me how much they relied on God every day. And I realized that was to me the most significant thing they had done, was that they let me see if they were struggling with the church, if there were, not in an unhealthy way that you're showing the kids like more than they should see so that they're feeling insecure or anything, but like if they were stressed, if my mom was having a really hard time and was worried about something, she would literally be worshiping. My mom was the worship leader for years. So she would be in our living room worshiping. And I remember that as a kid. I remember her like crying out to God and me seeing, man, she needs him. Like, this isn't just something that they take us to on Sunday morning. This is something that my parents are actually relying on him every day. So anyway, so thank you. I love what you guys were saying there, because I can tell you, like, as a kid of parents like that, it has a big impact. And all my siblings and I all love Jesus to this day. And I think that's significant. We saw that they needed Jesus every day. It wasn't something they were just telling us. It was something we saw every day. So anyway, I threw that out there because I could and because we had time. I'm going to move to the next question here, and then we'll probably, we've got a couple more, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A. But Tom, I would love to hear from you kind of just like how you help your kids take like next steps. Like, so there's baptism, obviously that's a big one. Or even before that, maybe before they're even ready to take the step of baptism, or maybe they have been baptized and it's like, now what do we do with them? Like, what are some things that you've used or just discussions that you've had with your kids about like their growth and their next steps as, they're seeking Jesus and as they're a part of the church and as they're following him? And then any of the rest of the panelists can chime into that question as well.
When they were younger, we kind of did a lot of the same things that have been said already. A lot of books, reading through the little children's Bible and stuff like that. As they've gotten older, it's been more of just kind of keeping the lines of communication open and maintaining the trust of hey, you can come talk to me about stuff. I mean, they're both public schools, so they both they get a lot of education that's happening at school that kind of has to be undone at home. And so for me, it's a lot of kind of living it out, giving them the example. I don't really memorize scripture very well, but I can remember the stories. And so my personal devotions, I'm in a pretty good place with that. I'm not in a good place with family devotions, but it's kind of like when the mask drops in the airplane, you kind of put yours on first, then you help the others. So I'm in a good place with my devotions. And I use those stories to try to talk to the kids as things arrive, like come up. Whether it's something that happened with David in the Old Testament or something in the New Testament, I find ways to kind of interject biblical stories into what they're going through in their daily lives. They were both baptized on October 13th. And so they saw so many people going through being baptized that they had the understanding of it. And then they made the decision that they wanted to be baptized themselves. And so that was we really didn't talk about it too much, but they saw it in action. And I didn't want to like force it on them either. I didn't want to be like, hey, you have to be baptized. It was something that they truly came to on their own. And they definitely understood it. Conversations with Pastor John and stuff. So that was good. When I was younger, And when they were younger, I was like, this is how I'm going to teach my kids. This is how it's going to be. They're going to grow up to be these perfect little angels. Well, that was not the case. And I've learned my lessons over the course of the past, 15 and a half years. But it's, yeah, I wouldn't trade it. I've grown, they've grown, and we're in a really good place now.
Yeah, Diana.
Yeah, I would love to add to that next step idea, the idea of serving, which I would imagine is something that is on a lot of people's hearts. But I find that as far as next steps and growth for our family, it's always been centered around serving, and where will God use us? How can we plug in, whether it's at the church or in outside ministries and things. And so that's a whole kind of unique perspective that I have with having one daughter who doesn't go out very well into public. And so finding ways for her to plug in and serve still. So kind of like it's that uniqueness of your family, knowing what that's going to look like. You might have one who wants to be on stage. You might want one who wants to sweep floors. You might have one, so that's another one of those, like Tom was saying, like modeling for them, which I love about serving, because serving is so contagious. It's so powerful. And it's such a sense of belonging, right? When you're plugged in and serving, you're part of something too. So it's such neat steps for developing relationships and continuing to grow.
And that's something that can start super early with them, not only seeing where we're plugged in and serving, but bringing them along whenever we can. One of the first things I took Enzo to, so the first one day of community that we had a decade plus ago, I was there super early in the morning to set up, then had some family obligations, and then I was going back to clean up. Enzo was maybe one. He was in the backpack carrier on my back as we were going around picking up trash. I'm like, I want to expose him to this from the very beginning. And then getting him to this point where he's serving in the cafe and loving plugging in with people, and going to one day of thanks, and me just kind of standing off in the background watching him to just say, here, just go find a need, and letting him explore his gifts through that and let them develop. But we set the example, and then it's that apprentice model. You show them, then they do it with you, and then they do it on their own. And serving's the same way. They see us getting plugged in, then they want to come along, and then they say, hey, I'm going to go do this on my own to give back.
I think that's the Jesus model, isn't it? Like that we're teaching them how to be the hands and feet of Jesus. This is where Jesus became really real to a lot of my kids, was in serving, because it's a tangible way that kids can, love on other people. A lot of their ways are very physical. And so learning how to serve at such a young age is just like probably the best gift you could give them. I mean, my kids, I was toting babies into, youth groups and whatever, just slung on my back, and that they grew up, that's just all they've ever known. And for them, that was just like, that's where Jesus became real, because it was a way that they could see love, and they could see and they could do love.
All right, I have one last question for you guys before I open it up to any questions in general that anyone wants to ask. So obviously you have these adorable, tiny little humans that have been trusted with your care, and we're in a big, huge, broken world. And so not only with things like pandemics or things that have gone on in the past few weeks and just stuff like that, but I would love to hear, and I didn't pick any particular person, so we can do the awkward pause and whoever speaks up first will just answer. But I would just love to hear from you guys. How do you walk through the big stuff with your kids? And even from a young age. So whether that is, things like a pandemic or big stuff like that is impacting the whole world, like a lot of things are right now, or even things like loss of family members, or stuff that it's so big even for an adult, and for a kid to try to process and walk through some of that is just, it's hard and it's challenging. So I would love to hear from you guys, any experience you've had with that, any resources that have been helpful, even scripture verses or conversations that you've had as you've tried to walked with your kids through the big, hard things in life.
I'll speak to that right away, because I have a go-to for sure. And this kind of applies to all, we've experienced, death within our family. We've, obviously experienced it. And that's always to try to, I always just want to bring them back to view it from God's perspective. Like, bad things happen in this world, and God is not, God is a God of love, so he's not responsible for those things, right? And he's always using all things for our good, so he's going to even turn those bad things around, right? So that verse, I think, is a very crucial one for our kids to know, that he's always turning things around for those who love him. So we start to look for those things. It's a challenge in our house, like, okay, what do you think God's going to do with this? You know what I mean? How's God going to use this? Even in this pandemic, it was like, okay, you know what, guys, look at this. We're seeing all these families spending time together that they don't normally spend together. This is God. You know what I mean? Like, so you bring all the positive threads. They lost their grandfather last year. And it was like, we've been praying. My oldest child, who was 27, had been praying for his grandfather's salvation his entire life. Never knew anything else but to be praying for his grandfather's salvation. Well, like, God is so amazing and so merciful, like, that we were able to find out that, like, the week before he died, he went to visit a pastor friend that he had in Florida and asked him to pray prayer with him. I mean, like, this was like so good.
Cool.
So, it doesn't always end like that, but I mean, talk about persistence. I mean, like, literally, this was a weekly prayer in our house. God, we just need Grampy to see you for who you are. We just want Grampy to love you, and like, God just delivered, like, in the nick of time, like, just like God can do sometimes. So that's, I guess, just testimony to the persistence of prayer, bringing these things up. We have this little box, and it's not a box, it's a board with little slots, and it's prayer requests that we have, ongoing prayer requests. So we pray every day together. And so we don't forget, we will put these prayers down and put them on this board, and, kind of take turns pulling them off, kind of a thing, and pray for different things. My kids don't all like to pray for this. I make everybody pray individually. That's one thing that I do, because I feel like they need to learn how to pray, right? So, like, I don't want them to just be listening to me pray. I mean, yes, they can learn by listening to me, but I want them to pray for themselves. So everybody kind of picks their thing. They're gonna, they'll say, so what's happening today, Mom? And I'll say, well, here are the things, we'll pull from the list and, off the board. And those are the things that we pray for. And we have our regular things, we have our new things. But I guess what I would say is, challenge them to find God in everything, because God is always in it, and there is always good that comes out of it. You just have to be looking and be willing to see it.
And I would say also, as you center on that truth that God is good all the time, and especially age appropriate, depending on where they're at, is just being real with your own struggles in it. This is hard. Yeah, this is not what I was wanting, or whatever, whatever, fill in the blank, but God is good. And I'll say that to them. He is always faithful. Remember this time? Remember when this happened and we were struggling? And so something about them seeing, yeah, struggling's okay. It's okay to struggle. It's a normal human thing. But what do we do in the midst of that? We go right back to God and say, he's in control. He's got this. He's good. He promises he'll never leave us. And we just hold on to the truth.
And I think that's why it's so important to find a couple of passages that really strike you, things that have been powerful in your life. I know two of the early ones that we taught our kids, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, because God is with me. That's one of the very first things, followed quickly by, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Giving them that spirit of faith and courage and wisdom and power and all that God promises us when we follow wholeheartedly after him and after his will. Melissa, you mentioned that God is jealous. Yeah, that's a hard one to wrestle with early on. But then when you realize his jealousy is a jealousy of love and adoration for us and for all of us.
All right, for our last few minutes, I want to open it up if any of you have any questions for these guys. So if anyone from our team, Josh or Anna, or any of our parents sitting here would like to ask any questions of these guys, now is your chance. Or if panelists have questions for other panelists.
The only chat that I saw was apparently Sarah was really impressed with Melissa's book recommendations, and she's already jumped on it. I love that.
Good ones.
So Johanna, you don't have children of your own, but now you're an aunt. So how are you approaching this with an infant that you get to be an influence on from the very beginning?
That's a great question, Christian. I was actually just talking with my brother and my sister-in-law about discipline, because we are only just starting. So I feel like I was born to be an aunt. Like, I am so excited about this. Like, I was made for this. And
You're
I
going to be the
also
cool
feel,
aunt, clearly.
oh man, yeah, we're going to go on adventures for sure. But I also feel like a lot of what I've done the past 3 years just sets me up to be like the role that I want to be in his life, because so much of it has been like to support parents and what they're doing and support your family and what they're doing. So I'm excited about that. But man, he's at the point, so he's 10 months old today. It's his 10-month-old. But he is very much at the point where we were just chatting, where they're realizing like we really need to have like our discipline strategies down, because he's really like moving out of that like newborn, not really aware what's like you're doing going on, into that like, I think I actually understand what it is to defy you now, and I'm going to start testing that and pushing it. So that's where, I don't know, that was a cool conversation for me to have with them, to realize like, okay, like whatever you guys are going to be doing for discipline, like I'll be backing you up on that. Like, we'll be doing that with you at meal times. We'll be supporting you in that, because that is actually what he needs right now. And that is what he needs, even literally for his spiritual like growth and development, is the discipline that they're going to be providing for him. I mean, because obviously they've been loving him, and they've been supporting him, and they've been, you know, we all coo over him, and he has a lot of love pouring into his life. Because he's the first grandbaby too, on both sides. So this is a very, very loved baby. But yeah, just that what he also very much needs are boundaries and discipline, and that's what they get to provide in his life right now. So.
And you bring up a great point of having those conversations ideally before you need them, but have them with your spouse so that you two are both coming from the same side, and have them with the grandparents on both sides too, because it was so encouraging when Enzo started having those moments of my mom saying, here's how I raised you, how do you want me to raise him? And that, in my view, I'm like, I lived, do whatever you did, it worked. And for her, we were talking just this morning. She said, you know, my biggest prayer as a parent was every night, God, please fix whatever I did wrong, and please give me a chance to do it right tomorrow, or do it better tomorrow. And it's not that we can always do it right, but if we can do it better, just a little bit better than the previous generation, better than us of yesterday, whatever bar you set, just keep loving them more and more, even when they're challenging.
All right, we've got a question from Anna here that I love. So Anna is asking, are there any daily, weekly, or seasonal rhythms that you think have been really impactful for developing your kids' faiths? So any daily, weekly, or seasonal rhythms that have helped to develop your kids' faith?
Well, kids love routine, and they love structure, even if they don't admit it. So I think some of the daily and weekly rhythms are just being consistent. In our household, church was never optional. And we went, unless we were all bleeding to death or dying, we all went. And you know, literally, you would have to prove to me that you were too ill to go to church. And that was like a test. So those things are really impactful. You know, now, like for them as young adults, it's like it's already part of their habits, right? Like we're helping them to develop life habits. So being consistent about taking time for God on a daily, whatever time that looks like. It can look different for every family, but taking time out for God, and then you know, dedicating time to Him whenever your church time is, and making that something that you're really committed to. In our house, that was a number one priority. Like whatever else happened throughout the week didn't really matter, but Sunday morning was happening. And then whatever other commitments that we make, like seasonally, I would say, you know, there's lots of opportunities around the Christmas holiday to serve and to give and to of your time and energy. And so we would make a commitment to something, whatever it is. Could be different. There are some things we did every year. We did Operation Christmas Child every single year for as long as I can remember. And the kids would like get giddy with excitement to fill these boxes. And that was just, it was an event that we, you know, that we really looked forward to. And for them, you know, it was an opportunity to give. So give of their time, give of their, also, I guess I'll just add this one more thing. We always their entire life have picked children either through World Vision or Compassion International to sponsor, just so that they could see that, first of all, I think it opens their eyes to the fact that there are children all over the world who live in different circumstances, and that God loves those children too, and that we are called to love them as well. So those are just a few things I can think of.
Well, and it's, I think part of the beauty of sponsorships or partnering with missionaries abroad, getting the magnet or the picture of the child and putting it on the refrigerator, so that it's just something that they just keep saying. They say, oh yeah, we do this, and this is why, because we're sharing God's love,
yeah,
in real and tangible ways, and it might mean that we might be sacrificing something here to be able to give elsewhere.
I would say that rhythm, I know we talked briefly about it too, but that rhythm of serving together as well. So, we've had events in the past and whatever those are going to look like going forward, but opportunities for you all together to go and be behind something. Some of those days, like Monday of Community, I remember my girls saying this was like the best day ever. So these opportunities that we give them to look beyond themselves and to look to a higher cause and loving people like God wants us to.
All right, we're going to do one last question here from our chat that I think is the perfect closing question, because it brings it back to what we are all about. Because the whole reason we're doing this panel, the whole reason we are so passionate about supporting you as parents and wanting to be there for your family and support your kids to know Jesus, is because we want more people in the kingdom of heaven. And so this really brings it back to that. So this is a question that I'd love to hear from any of you as you answer that. So the question is, both of our sides of the family are non-believers. How can we navigate visits with them and conflict that arise? So just that whole conversation and question around non-believers in your family, and they're visiting with your kids, and how do you handle that dynamic with your family and your kids?
Well, I can speak to that from my husband's side of the family. As I stated, their grandfather was a non-believer their entire lives, and that's the first thing that we did was put it up as a prayer point in our house. Because that made them aware, and not in a way that was demeaning or disrespectful, but like in a way that we was showing them love and support, because we really wanted this for them, because we knew that what is life outside of Jesus. And we talk about that a lot, because there's a lot of hopelessness outside of Jesus as well, and sometimes that gets infiltrated into the family dynamic when you get together and they're talking about all the negatives and things like that. So boundaries are important, because for us, boundaries were important because I didn't want my kids to be infiltrated with those things younger than they were able to handle them. Unconditional love was always still there. We were always reminding them, it's unconditional love, and that there was still value to a lot of the things that they brought. In terms of the family structure, but definitely boundaries, and definitely made it a prayer point to pray for their salvation, because we love them and we wanted Jesus for them.
It's definitely a challenge, and boundaries are that's the best way to put it. We don't watch the news here. We just don't. I don't want that negativity. Not that I want my children to be raised in a bubble. I mean, we're huge proponents of public school, but at the same point, finding the right time. My 9-year-old doesn't need to see riots. I can talk to her about what it means to love others that just unconditionally. Yet she's at that point of innocence where she just sees people. Like, there is no colors, just people. And that's a beautiful thing. So I don't want to negate that purity in her. So yeah, with my dad, it was, hey, these are things that aren't appropriate for my kids to see. And I understand that they're playing in the background and it doesn't look like they're watching. But all of us with kids know that when we don't think they're listening is probably when they're hearing us the most clearly. And those are when you start hearing things that you said come back at you, and you're like, oh, they were paying attention. Oh no. But the plus side of that is, hey, they are paying attention even when you don't think they are. So be careful of what you put in there. So yeah, it can be, and that's why that intentionality with how you want to raise them and how you want to discipline them, the other people in their lives, they need, we hope and pray that they will respect those decisions that you make, and respect you for saying, hey, we've thought this through, we've talked about it, and this is what we want for our family. But it's definitely a hard one.
All right, I want to make sure that we get you guys out on time, but I am so thankful for the panelists who are willing to come and share. Like they said at the beginning, they don't have all the answers, but we can certainly learn from each other. And I certainly have. I really value that you are here to do this and share with us and just point us back to how you're getting through it with Jesus, and he's the one that you're relying on. So I'll make available that list of devotional stuff. I certainly hope that this is the first of more to come, and that we will continue to share and just really support each other in this way. And so parents who are on here right now, or parents who will be watching this later, we love you guys so much. We know what you do matters more than anyone can even imagine, and more than anyone can even picture right now. And we are here for you, and we want to be a support to you. So let us know if there's ever anything, questions that you have, or you're looking for a resource or something that we could be doing to support you, because you've got a whole group of people, and this is only a little sampling of all the people that really are cheering for you and support you and want to be a practical help and just an encouragement in your life as you're doing what I think is pretty much the most amazing job that God could ask anyone to do, which is to raise.
I just want to throw out there, we're here to try and be a practical help, but we're also a prayerful help. So let's come alongside one another and pray through these things, and just know that you're not alone. People have been there, people will be there, but it's the support that the church community has that is unlike anything else.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to actually ask Anna to jump right in here and pray for these families and parents, and the ones who will be watching later, to finish us out.
All right. God, I just thank you so much for the fact that you entrust children to parents. God, that is such an insane responsibility and a gift and a joy. And I just pray over all the parents that are watching or listening to this, whether that's now or in the future. God, that is just such an impressive and important role. And so I just ask that you would empower them with your spirit, that you would remind them that you have given them these children for a purpose, for a reason, that you don't make mistakes. And God, that they are fully equipped and fully capable of parenting these children because you have given them to them. And so I just ask that you would fill them to overflowing with your peace, with your presence, with your wisdom of how to handle the situations that come up, the questions that are difficult, or the scenarios that are just seemingly impossible at times. God, I just give your wisdom in a way that only you can, and help us just to represent you well and to love you more and more each day. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you all.